Hi, my name is Dan Chaskin. I'm a podiatrist. I just wanted to discuss about foot dermoscopy, and I just want to begin this presentation by giving a couple of definitions. Podiatrists generally tend to deal with lesions on the foot, which could be the plantar aspect of the glabrous or dermatoglyphic areas of the foot. What is dermatoglyphics? Well, basically you have a fingerprint. See this? You have ridges which happen to be overlying the flat skin. When you have a ridge, you have flat skin followed by a ridge, and everybody has their unique fingerprint. Same on the foot. When you have a toe, you have a toe print. The ridges and the flat skin, some people refer to as furrows. I was reading Podiatry today, which had an article on the acro area, which happened to be a melanoma, and it basically had something that's called a ridge pattern. What is a ridge pattern? Ridge pattern happens to be where most of the pigment of any sort of a lesion or a nevus is concentrated on the ridge itself. Now, how can you see this with a naked eye? How can you tell if something is suspicious, possibly malignant, in need of a biopsy, versus something that is benign? This is a problem that podiatrists have, and they have something called a dermatoscope. This is a non-polarized dermatoscope. It needs some sort of an interface, such as, you could say, ultrasound fluid, or it could be any sort of alcohol. Your medium that you use, the consistency of it actually does affect the image that's ultimately gotten. Unfortunately, a non-polarized dermatoscope does not have the ability to see deep into the deeper structures, such as the papillary dermis. Or when you basically have the skin, you have something that's called a reedy ridge, and you have epidermis, and the epidermis consists of certain layers. You have the stratum corneum, you have the spinous layer, the basal layer. This is the epidermis, and beneath that you have the epidermal dermal junction, for which a polarized dermatoscope can actually detect and see soft tissue of the papillary dermis, what's actually going on. And there are different pigments, different colors, and this is the world of podiatry and foot dermatology. This is not what appears when you basically go above, I think it's a line that's separates the dermatoglyphic area of the body from other parts of the body, such as the leg and the foot. You lose the fingerprints. Look at your foot, look at your leg. You see there are no fingerprints on your leg. You don't have ridges on your leg, you just have them on the plantar aspect of your foot. And I'm going to cover this material in another YouTube video. By the way, there are great references out there. There's the internet. I just attended a DermFoot seminar, which I learned a lot. And they have other references, such as the Atlas of Dermoscopy. They have different books, a book by Dr. Sawyer. There's so much out there, and the main thing is, I do not consider myself an expert. I'm just a podiatrist trying to learn the topic, dermoscopy, and perhaps by repeating certain concepts, biomechanical concepts, and correlating them with what I learn from a dermatoscope, I could actually know that it's not necessarily the anatomy that affects lesions, but the biomechanical faults in feet that affect lesions. For instance, podiatrists are well aware that you have different axes of motion. I know that a lot of people other than podiatrists might not understand this, but when you have an axis of motion, there's a certain degree or freedom of range in a plane which has the most motion available, which is perpendicular to the plane upon which the axis of motion lies upon. The axis of motion lies upon two planes, and you have the most motion in the plane that's perpendicular to the two planes upon which the axis of motion lies upon. For example, if you have a sagittal plane, the axis of motion for the sagittal plane, where sagittal plane motion occurs, the axis of motion actually lies upon the transverse plane and the frontal plane. And once you have this understanding of axis of motion, you could actually look at different deformities, such as the flexible plantarflexed ray, which has the most degree of compensation which occurs within the sagittal plane and the frontal plane. You basically don't have your supinatory rock that you have when you have a rigid, plantarflexed first ray. What you actually have on the compensation side is a relative pronation of the rear foot, which occurs, and you also have the first ray, which actually dorsiflex upwards instead of having a supinatory rock, which is a term I learned in biomechanics back in 1982. Why is this important? Biomechanics and dermoscopy cannot be separate. They have to intertwine with each other. There's such a thing called a lattice pattern versus a fibrillar pattern. Now, a fibrillar pattern of a lesion is when you have lines that cross over different ridges. And it basically does this because there are shearing forces that are occurring in the rigid plantarflexed first ray. However, if the ray would be a flexible plantarflexed first ray, you might not necessarily see this fibrillar pattern of a lesion. You might actually have a lesion which might have a lattice pattern, which is basically perpendicular, lines that are perpendicular to the parallel, furrow pattern that was discussed within the Podiatry Today article on acrolentiginous melanoma. I'm trying to get biomechanics and take different deformities and the compensation for these different deformities and to see how they relate anatomically as well as biomechanically with affecting different lesions on the bottom of the foot. It's very complicated, and I'm trying my best to talk and bring this all together. It's very difficult to do, but this flexible plantarflexed ray versus a rigid plantarflexed first ray is just one example. So you can't really look at anatomy alone. You have to do a full biomechanical workup and correlate this with your dermatoscopic exam as well as your clinical exam. I also learned something else. There are different dermatoscopes with high polarization. You can actually see underneath the structures. You don't want a dermatoscope that will just give you only magnification. You need high polarization. I will continue this discussion on another video. Thank you.